like this stuff.
Hi guys, what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk through the prompt that you guys read about Gandhi and the letter that he wrote. And my goal in doing this is hopefully to let you kind of see inside my brain as I go through one of these prompts, maybe give you some tips or insight about how to approach these kind of things, and give you some ideas of what to look for to help you with your essays. So first thing, obviously, is we got to read the prompt and pay close attention to whatever we can glean from that prompt. It says, in 1930, Mohandas Mahatma Gandhi led a nonviolent march, it's important, in India, protesting Britain's colonial monopoly on the taxation of an essential resource, salt. The Salt March, as it came to be known, was a triggering moment for a larger civil disobedience movement that eventually won India independence from Britain in 1947. Shortly before the Salt March, Gandhi had written to Viceroy Lord Irwin, the representative of the British Crown in India. The passage below is the conclusion of the letter. Read the passage carefully. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze the rhetorical choices Gandhi makes to present his case to Lord Irwin. I'm also going to make a note of the civil disobedience movement because that seems kind of important to put myself in the mindset of what was going on. Okay, so they're basically getting at what every rhetorical analysis essay is getting at. What is the central claim? They don't come out and say it. They don't make it specific, but you need to talk about the central claim. So you want to make sure that you do that and that as you're reading, no matter what the prompt says, you're thinking about that. And then also what rhetorical choices, devices, however you want to phrase it, are used to support. All the rhetorical analysis essays for AP Lang, all the SAT essays, they're getting at the same thing. What's the central claim? How do the devices prove it? Even if they phrase it in different ways. So let's take a look at what's going on. I know that embarking on nonviolence, I shall be running what might fairly be termed a mad risk, but the victories of truth have never been won without risk, often of the gravest character. Conversion of a nation that has, I think that's interesting, conversion. The reason why it's interesting to me is because that's a big word to people in the Western world because of religion and Christianity. I don't know that you use it a ton in India or in the Eastern world, but that seems to me that he's trying to set something up, trying to say, I know where you're coming from, or show this oneness because he knows his audience is white, British, probably supposed to be religious, at least in the appearances. Conversion of a nation that has consciously or unconsciously preyed upon another, far more numerous, far more ancient, and no less cultured than itself, is with any amount of risk. This is interesting how he's establishing a connection between the two. And if he's trying to convince somebody that what they're doing is wrong to somebody that they have a connection with, then you are starting to build on ethos, setting yourself up as somebody who needs to be taken seriously, and maybe even a little bit of pathos because you're making this oneness between the two. I've deliberately used the word conversion. I thought so. For my ambition is no less to convert the British people through nonviolence and thus to make them see the wrong they have done to India. I do not seek to harm your people. This is important because he's setting himself up as someone who's not going to hurt you. So this might be a little bit of ethos that is going on. I want to serve them even as I want to serve my own. I believe that I've always served them. If someone's using the same word 3 times in 2 sentences, you better take note. It means that it's a very important word. So I'm thinking about that. He's talking about how he wants to be equals. He doesn't think they deserve this taxation, but yet then he sets himself up as a servant, which is really interesting. So I want to start thinking about why he might be doing that. I served, there we go, there's the word again, them up until 1919 blindly, but when my eyes were open and I conceived non-cooperation, the object was still to serve them. I employed the same weapon that I have, in all humility, successfully used against the dearest members of my family. If I have equal love for your people with mine, it will not long remain hidden. It will be acknowledged by them, even as the members of my family acknowledged after they had tried me for several years. If the people join me, as I expect they will, the sufferings they will undergo, unless the British nation sooner retraces its step, will not be enough to melt the stoniest hearts. Interesting imagery. And then he's also setting this up as with his family. So this is a lot of ethos here. Him as a servant, him as I know you, him as I'm willing to work for you. I've been willing to work for you. I've been your servant. So some of that they should take seriously and understand the rest of this work. That's something to keep an eye out for in speeches and letters. We've seen that with Dr. Martin Luther King's work, setting up a sense of ethos first, like you need to listen to me, you have reason to listen to me before getting into more of the argument. So definitely that's going on here. In the word servant, I would definitely talk about that in my essay, the connotations of it and how it contributes to the fact that he believes that this is unjust, what they're doing with the salt tax. The plan through civil disobedience will be to combat such evils as I have sampled out. If we want to sever the British connection, it is because of such evils. The evil part is interesting as well. When they are removed, the path becomes easy. Then the way to friendly negotiation will be open. This is an if-then statement. So he's using some logos here. I could talk about that. Or I could talk about the connotations of the word evil as well, but the logos going on right here, this is what he's going from ethos to logos afterwards. I invite you then to pave the way for immediate removal of those evils and thus open a way for a real conference between equals, interested only in promoting the common good of mankind through voluntary fellowship and in arranging terms of mutual help and commerce equally suited to both. You have unnecessarily laid stress upon communal problems that unhappily affect this land. Important, let me try to get the second column. Though they undoubtedly are for the consideration of any scheme of government, they have little bearing on the greater problems which are above communities and which affect them all equally. So this idea, again, that this salt tax is not just hurting the Indians, it's hurting the British as well. And he's going to talk about the evils again. But if you cannot see your way to deal with these evils, and my letter makes no appeal to your heart, on the 11th day of this month, I shall proceed with such co-workers of the ashram as I can take to disregard the provisions of the salt law. I regard this tax to be the most iniquitous of all the poor man's standpoint. As the independence movement is essentially for the poorest in the land, the beginning will be made with this evil. The wonder is that we have submitted to the cruel monopoly for so long. It is, I know, open to you to frustrate my designs by arresting me. I hope that there will be tens of thousands ready in a disciplined manner to take up the work after me, and in the act of disobeying the Salt Act to lay themselves open to the penalties of a law that should have never disfigured the statute book. So this is where he has a little bit of his threat going on, like, okay, I'm nice to you, nice to you, nice to you. You should listen to me. This is like family. We're like equals. Here's the logic of it. I hope you don't lock me up. But if you do lock me up, there's going to be tens of thousands of people to take my place. So he gets a little bit of a threat here that, yes, you should definitely do this. Then he pedals it back a little bit. I have no desire to cause you unnecessary embarrassment or any at all, so far as I can help. I'm going to put is nice again. I'm going to put threat up here. If you think that there's any substance in my letter, and if you will care to discuss matters with me, and if to the end you will like me to postpone publication of this letter, I shall gladly refrain on receipt of a telegram to that effect soon, after this reaches you. You will, however, do me the favor not to deflect me from my course unless you can see your way to conform to the substance of this letter. This letter is not in any way intended as a threat, even though he kind of did a little bit up there, but anyways, but is a simple and sacred, that's an interesting word, duty, perpetuary and a civil register, excuse me. Therefore, I'm having it specially delivered by a young English friend who believes in the Indian cause and is a full believer in nonviolence, and whom Providence seems to have sent me, as it were, for the very purpose. Okay, so a lot going on in the letter. Obviously, the purpose, the central claim of his letter is that it is important for Britain to come back on the salt tax, and the devices that I would go with, there's a lot we could pick from, but I would definitely talk about ethos, tying into ethos the connotations of the word serve, especially since he uses it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in this little section. Could definitely talk about logos that's going on down here with the if-then statements and how that would support his case. I'd also talk about tone overall. He comes to him in a very kind tone overall, almost somewhat meek tone, a tone of servitude, even though he is talking about having, setting up this civil disobedience in protest to what's going on, and actually putting forth a little bit of a threat over here. So in thinking about his audience, with India being a colony with India being a colony of England, with him being probably viewed as less than by some of the British colonizers, he knows his position. He might not believe in his position, but that's what he's doing. That's kind of interesting here, is coming to them through his position, but also the little bit of a threat here, a little bit of strength. So you could say some interesting things about tone as well. If you do talk about tone, make sure that you're talking about connotations of words, or maybe the organization of his argument that would help support your interpretation of tone. So a lot of things you could pick from, a lot of words to get through and to try to understand. But if you could make your way through this and maybe take it paragraph by paragraph, I think most of you could come away with this with a pretty good essay. So I'm looking forward to looking at your essays, talking about this letter a little bit more in our Zoom meetings, and seeing you guys all this week. Thanks.